Hey, welcome back to the Astrology of Things. I'm your astrologer and host, Sheena, and this is my space where I talk about anything and everything related to astrology. I promise there will always be something that you can learn and something that will open your eyes and open your mind to seeing and understanding the language of astrology that surrounds us in our everyday lives. So today is March 15th, 2021, and in today's episode, I'll be talking about one of my favorite houses in astrology, which is the ninth house. So the ninth house deals with how we find and determine life's meaning. It deals with the matters that help us formulate answers to the big why of our existence, consciousness, and life. It deals with understanding and helping us understand our relationship to our environment and our universe. This house, we're able to explore, contemplate, and experience circumstances that have us questioning our morality and virtues, and also understanding who is the judge of it all. This house has us questioning things such as who is our creator? Is there even a creator? What is right? What is wrong? Is there a beginning to life? Is there really an end? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? And if so, who determines who goes to hell and heaven? Therefore, this house really deals with philosophies, spiritual beliefs, metaphysics, voyages, long distance travel. You'll find astrology from this house, dreams. You'll also find spiritual leaders, gurus, sages, and prophets from this particular house. So, if you think about it, the ninth house follows the eighth house, and the eighth house is the house that rules death, right? So the ninth house ventures into territories of what happens after we leave this earth, or even what happens before we come into this earth. Since this house precedes the 10th house, the 10th house represents our mother and is the vehicle through which we come into this existence. And so it would make sense that the ninth house precedes the 10th house and follows the 8th house. So if you think about it, like if anyone passes away in your life, especially ones that have been close to us, most often we start to seek out and wonder like what happens after they die. So this ninth is a place where we contemplate those questions about human life. So in traditional astrology, the ninth house is associated with the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is a planet that is expansive and is the ruler and governor of like principles. And when I say principles, like principles and laws that are inherent in nature. These Jupiterian ties points toward the ninth house's connections to metaphysics. If you view something from a metaphysical standpoint, you're usually kind of looking at something from a bird's eye view. And metaphysics is the science of the inward nature of things. From the ninth house, we're able to get a bird's eye view and a very high perspective of our life. But at the same time, we're also able to get to a really deep level of analysis of the inner workings of our life existence. And from either a bird's eye view or higher perspective of life or a deeper perspective of life, we're still able to identify connections and patterns and understand how everything synthesizes together. This house deals with matters that extend beyond our physical reality and realm, and it branches into the abstract space, which is a space that is not barred down by the materialistic things or the man made things that we experience in this physical reality. Another way to look at this house is to think about this house being the holder of universal laws and principles. These are natural laws that are ingrained into us, just as it's ingrained to animals or any living being in this universe. And if you think about it, um, animals are born with this innate knowledge. They're born knowing how to create their nests. If you think about a bee, it's born knowing how to be a part of um, its swarm and knowing how to contribute to its society, just as a bird is born and knows how to um, build a nest without being taught how to do so. It's just a natural born instinct. So we too are programmed with this wisdom and innate knowledge and understanding, just as animals are. And this information comes from our ancestry, our ancestors. And this is information that we're taught to forget. We're taught to um, just avoid and kind of push to the side, because most of that information doesn't have a place in the current structure of our capitalistic society. So the universal laws and principles that I speak of shouldn't be confused with man-made laws. Um, Man-made laws have their own prejudices and biases ingrained in them. And this is so much different than natural laws. And in order to understand the truth of nature and its laws and principles, we have to go inward. We have to listen and reflect, retrospect, meditate, and pray on those principles and ideals. And so, in a way that it helps us bring out this inner knowing and inner knowledge that we were born with. So, this house also relates to individuals or experiences that expand our understanding and ideas of our existence. It expands our mental capacity and broadens our horizons on the perspective of life. And of course, it could be experienced through obtaining new information from new walks of life or new cultures that aren't from our immediate surroundings and environment. That's why this house is also attributed to like voyages and missions and trips and long distance travel, as well as like sages and gurus and spiritual leaders and mentors, because this journey and voyage to understand your own existence usually involves you going on a mission or a journey to seek out that information. So, the seeking of this knowledge and the pursuit of this information to expand our mind and consciousness is also why this house is associated with higher education. But this higher education shouldn't be confused with obtaining like a PhD or a master's degree, because with modern education, there tends to be agendas behind the curriculum, and is set up in a particular way to um, mold and form society in a particular way. So, these higher degrees are always tied to an institution or a larger organization. Now, I also see the ninth house as our wisdom. So, in addition to our internally ingrained knowledge that we're born with, that I was discussing a little bit ago, as we go through life, we also obtain wisdom through having our various life experiences. Um, and as they say, experience is always the best teacher. And through observation, reflection, and retrospection on these experiences of life, we gain new knowledge and are able to then pass that knowledge and information down to generations that follow us. And that's why you might also hear people talk about generational curses or patterns running through families. It's because, you know, people haven't healed that inner programming that they were essentially born with. So you can also look at the ninth house from the perspective of derived houses. So the ninth house is the fifth house from the fifth house. And your natal fifth house deals with your children. Therefore, the fifth house from your fifth house is the ninth house, which is tied to your grandchildren and very much tied to the lineage and information that you pass down to them. Also, another way to view the ninth house is seeing it as a place for the abstract and subjective mind. And this was something that Colson Turnbull mentioned in his book called Divine Language of Celestial Correspondence. This is one of my favorite go-to books, actually. He describes this house as the abstract and subjective mind, which he contrasts with the third house that he describes as the objective mind. And from my personal perspective, I see the ninth house being more tied to our intuitive knowledge, whereas the third house is more so tied to the extuitive knowledge. And yes, I just made up extuitive. Extuitive is not a word, but that's how I'm understanding the third house to be. Because the third house deals with what we're learning from, what we're being taught, what skills we're acquiring through our life. As Turnbull describes, I think subjectivity is a great way to explain the domain of the ninth house, because it deals with matters that aren't based in our common understanding and perception of what reality is. And the matters of this house aren't barred down to the physical limitations and restrictions that we have on this earthly plane. So the subjectivity and the abstraction of this house leads to its ties and associations with the dream world and visions and divination. Those things are not barred down by anything physical. Dreams, when we're sleeping, we have these dreams, and these dreams are in another realm or another universe. And I briefly mentioned long distance travel in this video, but this is my particular take on the long distance travel portion. So when astrologers speak of long distance travel, like, what are we basing and considering that distance on? Is long distance travel like traveling out of my natively born city? Is it traveling out of my native state? Is it traveling out of my native country? Is it traveling out of my native continent? So to me, it's not quite clear what this long distance travel really means. So I believe that long distance travel, long distance journeys has to be understood from the reasoning of the journey or the trip, and not necessarily the distance of the trip or the journey. So instead of seeing this as long distance journey or travel, I could see the meaning twisting into being more of a pilgrimage or a mission. So there is definitely a difference between traveling for pleasure and for being a tourist versus traveling to seek out spiritual enlightenment or to seek out spiritual knowledge and wisdom. Secondly, I could see long distance travel meaning travel that is not barred down to or barred down by our physical bodies. So I see this house tied to the idea of mental or spiritual travel, where you can travel to the past, into the future, or you can travel to different realms. To me, that is how I feel we as astrologers should present that and understand the idea of this long distance journey. So that being said, I attribute this house to astral travel, time travel, dreams, as I was mentioning earlier. And also, this is how diviners get their information and how prophets get their information, since they're able to travel to these different realms and different dimensions, getting that information. All right, so I hope you learned something new today. So be sure to look out for some of my future videos where I talk about the remainder of the houses, and I'm not going to do them in order because I don't really do anything in order. So until next time, I'll see you later.